I'm not a bassist, but I do have to record bass guitar pretty regularly. You might think that would mean I've spent some money on a really nice bass guitar to make my life easier, but I'm a tight-fisted Scotsman who loves a bargain. So for years now, I've been using a couple of very affordable P-basses without complaint. Despite the different names on the headstocks, it's clear that these are both manufactured in the same factory. They are identical in quality and construction, just tooled for vintage and modern P-bass pickups respectively. These are ideal studio tools that just get the job done, provided you're sending them through the appropriate signal chain. I've talked about that process in many other videos, but maybe it's time to dedicate a full episode as to why I have no desire to spend more on my studio bass experience. Let's begin with this one in Fiesta Red that everyone asks questions about whenever it shows up in videos. This is a Harley Benton PB50, a vintage style P-bass, obviously going for that original 1950s Fender look which revolutionised the bass playing world. At that time, in the late 40s, guitar was a dying instrument. It was all big band stuff that was popular. Guitarists just couldn't get gigs, and shifting across to upright bass was a bit of a skill gap. In 1951, Fender came out with the P-bass in response to this. Fretted neck like a guitar, played on a strap like a guitar, held horizontally like a guitar, and could be amplified like a guitar. This was designed to save guitarists from unemployment. Not everyone needed a guitarist, but everybody needed a bassist, and the P-bass made it easy for guitarists to join the dark side and keep the paid gigs coming in. Luckily for the field of guitar, rock and roll was the new genre just breaking through in the late 50s that would revive and sustain the popularity of guitar to this day. But bassists also saw the advantage of a more precision instrument and soon adopted the P-bass as their own. This, as the originals did, has a single coil pickup placed right in the middle of the body. That location, paired with a narrow field of view of the pickup, gives a super focused, punchy tone that makes these an absolute delight to record with. The magnets directly under the strings gives a very strong transient attack, which definitely adds to the character of a 50s style P-bass, at the expense of ruining a lot of 1950s speakers which weren't built robust enough to handle that volume spike. Studio engineers love P-basses because they stay in their lane. The sound is contained in a sonic pocket between the low end of the drums and the mid-range of guitars and other instruments. They just sit in a mix without any unwanted frequencies. This is what I'm using when I want something that can deliver the precision of 80s pop or Green Day style 90s and 2000s pop punk without blowing out the mix with too much thickness in the low end. It also pairs well with a pick, getting a real nice snappy tone with a pink Ernie Ball Everlast. Oh no, you can't play a bass with a pick! Ah, get fucked, you gatekeeping arsehole. There are thousands of bass players out there using picks, amongst them some of the most prolific bassists of all time. You want to know who used a pick? Carol fucking Kay. In her 65-year career, she recorded over 10,000 songs, most of them with a pick. And if that was good enough for Frank Zappa, the Beach Boys, Stevie Wonder, Barbra Streisand, Simon and Garfunkel, Sonny and Cher, the Monkees and Frank Sinatra, then a pick is good enough for me. Anyway, I'm only playing Green Day and Judas Priest. Those are supposed to be played with a pick. When I still want all of that punch but also need it to be a bit beefier, I'll opt for the more modern P-bass design. Modern in this sense, meaning the 1960s onwards. Somewhere towards the end of the 50s, Fender made a number of changes to their P-bass design, the major one being this 2-coil pickup. I've made a video all about this before, go and watch that one if you want to know all about the history, but the short version is, splitting the coil into 2 thicker, dumpier coils gives a fatter sound, which if wired properly is also hum cancelling. Doubling up the magnets and moving them either side of the strings gives a more consistent output without the massive sharp transient of the earlier design. A lot of that P-bass punch comes from the physical construction of the instrument, its scale length and the pickup placement, so we still have all the advantages of a P-bass, but with a chunky boy sound. There are a couple of upgrades on this. There's a Wilkinson bridge with brass saddles, which gets a bit more oomph out of the strings, and a Wizard pickup and high quality electronics, which enhanced the mid-range detail. This was a great bass to begin with, and these just took it over the edge. I love this for some Black Sabbath, for grunge, and for classic metal stuff as well. Of course, the instrument is only one part of the equation. For a raunchy rock bass, we also need an amplification chain. For bass tones, I want to get into the mind of a bassist, which naturally means not thinking too much about my equipment. Therefore, I default to what I know works for a rock bass: bi-amping the signal. The orange bass butler makes that super simple, and I stand by this being the single best piece of equipment Orange has ever made. This takes the bass signal and runs it through 2 parallel preamps. One clean bass pre with a built-in VCA compressor for all that chunky low end, and one dirty guitar pre to add all that tasty mid-range grit. These output separately across 2 XLRs so I can blend them to perfection in post. This costs 3 times the price of either of the basses that I'm using, but this, plus a cheap P-bass and a couple of upgrades, gets me a solid studio bass rig for less than 500 quid, and I think the results speak for themselves. So there you go. If you see me using a bass guitar in any future videos, then it's very likely going to be one of these. If you're looking to add any of this to your arsenal of recording equipment, you'll find a link in the description below which will contain these and other suggestions for decent low-cost bass options. Once again, I'm not a bassist. I just need something to get good results, and I found that these give me good results. Maybe if you are a bassist, you can let me know what I'm doing wrong in the comments. That's all for now. Keep it loud and stay safe.